We're going to start 10:30 sharp. Thank you for selecting me. It's like the first talk. I really appreciate it. And I think you're going to learn so much today from tech's secret superpower that's been lurking under our noses all this time. What is this funny word of neurodiverse talent? Let's unpack that sort of buzzword. Seems like the majority of people are here, so I'm gonna go this way. I may do funny movements. I hope, tell me if it's distracting, but you can focus on the pretty slides. And we're gonna focus on how to unleash, how to embrace neurodiversity. First of all, we'll see what it is, what it entails, the benefits of having it in the tech industry as a whole, and what you can do, what practical tips and advice that I have collected and shared from my experience, as well as just being in the space with fellow people that are neurodiverse. And what we can do as neurodiverse people and also neurotypical people, people who aren't neurodiverse, what can we do? What strategies can we do to help our industry grow and be ever more productive? So let's get into formalities. You might be thinking already what's going on. I'm giving you this huge term. I'm already throwing things at you. I wish I could say that I blocked off the entrances and exits, but I'm not allowed to do that. But hopefully you'll be fine being stuck with me for now. Help. You can just call me Cass. Cassandra feels very formal, and this is not formal, as you can see by my teddy bear sweater. I'm from Cape Town, first time in Joburg since 10 years. Last time I came here, I was an unaccompanied minor. That was really weird. I have a background in software engineering, having studied computer science, and I'm currently exploring the world of QA, automated testing and manual testing, and my current company is Solid iTech. Right now, I'm continuing my studies as an honors student at UNISA, and in my free time, I do autistic things and autistic things, like 3D art, stuff like that. And like I just mentioned, autistic, always have been, always will be, and I am passionate about neurodiversity. Autism, I'm going to explain to you very shortly, is it falls underneath that term of neurodiversity. And why am I passionate about it? Because I think it can bring so much value, not even just in the tech industry, but just as a whole, embracing it. Having friends who may be neurodiverse, how do you sort of embrace that and learn more about it? You may not know where to start. You may not have even heard of neurodiversity before. Actually, let's get into, and of course, with my friend Sonic here, my reason for joining and doing the passionate about neurodiversity and why I'm such an advocate for it is because I'm joining the war on autism on the side of autism. I'm being the advocate, the spokesperson where people need. But let's get into the spectrum of neurodiversity, right? What do I mean by that it's a spectrum? And what does it mean of all these terms that you may have actually heard in terms of pop culture, media? Perhaps you are diagnosed or your family member is, your friend. What does that mean? Well, of course, you have the more popular terms. ADHD, autism spectrum, dyslexia, but did you know that there's also dysgraphia, dyscalculia, and dyspraxia? And did you know that Tourette syndrome is not only just funny words that Eric Cartman says on South Park, but it's also motor tics, tics that are, and motors, movements that are unrestrained and difficulty to control them. Now, you may have heard, of course, of these terms, but there are also other less known diagnoses such as generalized anxiety, OCD, Prader-Willi syndrome, and Down syndrome. Of course, definitions vary from person to person. Some people who have autism tend to use older terms such as Asperger's. It's also very dependent on the person. And with these terminologies, it's also very important to remember not to paint everyone with the same brushstroke, right? The reason why we have the term for neurodiversity is that it was a term coined by a sociologist in the 90s. And that term was to display how, at the time, terms like this were seen as a deficit, a disorder, an impairment. There were even slurs that were used against us. So we wanted to show the diversity. Instead of an impairment, it's something that should be celebrated and accepted, and as if with any other human variation that we come across. So with those variations, it's important to remember the keyword variation. No two people with the same ADHD diagnosis presented in the same way. So it's very important to foster a culture of communication and know that this is not a be-all, end-all, right? Spectrum of social difficulties, for example, autism spectrum. I have social difficulties, but here I am right now, It can vary from person to person, so keep that in mind. despite the difficulties that I've mentioned, right? Sometimes the social capabilities, sometimes the physical things, we've been able to find ourselves through technology, though. We've been able to sort of unlock the world to us and find accessibility. We've been able to find communities on Reddit and Tumblr. Those are two that I've always frequented. Communities such as ADHD programmers, big community, 56,000 members. Apps that are made for us, by us, Lunatask, ADHD designed productivity app, the Hickey social platform for the autistic community. So thanks to internet and technology, we've been able to live a fulfilling life despite the difficulties that our conditions may impose on us. So it's no wonder that a lot of us find ourselves gravitating towards this career. And why am I in this career? Well, the industry, having been in this for about 2 years or so, continuing on, yeah, I would not finish a task. Very good afternoon, ADHD gang. The industry allows me to feel unique freedom, right? A lot of it attracts people who are neurodiverse, such as the fine detail, the routine, maybe in QA, looking at embedded systems, creativity in UX design, things like that. It's very specific things that attract us to this, the maybe more technical side of it. Accessibility features that are very common on computers nowadays, make it more accessible to us as a career. Like I said, harnesses my strengths. There's flexibility. Working from anywhere is a very up-and-coming trend. So you no longer have to sit in like a very neurodiverse, unfriendly office, maybe. Speaking of office, though, some structures still take some getting used to. Things like office distractions, social cues, engaging with clients, although that's very bad and just in general, things have to take a lot more effort, having to actively learn and practice these things. But why is it important to look past these difficulties that we may have? Like I just mentioned, why is it important to look past it and still embrace neurodiversity? Well, there are big name companies, HP, Oracle, SAP, Microsoft, among so many others that have identified the cognitive difference, the out-of-the-box thinking that neurodiversity provides with their company. They've gone and shown Microsoft has a neurodiversity hiring program because they've identified it's so important. JP Morgan and Chase's Autism at Work program showed that their teams that had autistic people performed up to 140% more productivity. Every individual will ultimately bring unique knowledge and skills that drives technological innovation, which is so important with this ever-moving field. Everything is happening so fast, right? Mentorship will lead to an increase in profitability, productivity, and customer loyalty. Putting that effort in and giving mentorship to those who are neurodiverse always has a positive impact. There's very little disadvantage. There's no reason not to. And yet the problem remains. Getting hired, workplace interactions, career transitions. Why is my mic's fine? Okay. Things like those for us are a bit more challenging. Did you know that in the US, there's a very well-known statistic that up to 85% of autistic adults are unemployed? And a more general statistic is that 30 to 40% of neurodiverse people find challenge getting employment. But what is that issue? How do we face these things? How do we sort of, and what figures can we look at that are more relevant? Some more figures very quickly. There's not a stats lesson. I'm not very good at stats. Recent study as recent as 2023, done by Vodafone, Colt, Samsung, and Nokia. So big names. They decided to do a study on neurodiversity, not only with ND or neurodivergent people, but also with NT or neurotypical persons. They wanted to see what either side wanted from the conversation, right? You can see that neurodiverse people wanted effort from their neurotypical colleagues, more than 60%, 64%. They wanted more effort and more intentional allyship. They wanted them a bit more respect and not sort of looked at like some otherworldly being, even though I can say I am out of this world. They also showed a considerable amount of difficulties in a traditional office environment, often citing distractions that weren't as obtrusive to a neurotypical counterpart. But what about the neurotypical counterparts? They also described wanting senior role models. They wanted people who would take up the initiative and show them how to be inclusive and how to be more intentional about that. They wanted someone to lead them and show them how to do it. And an overwhelming majority, 78% of the neurotypical people in the study, recognized the need for awareness training. They wanted tools to work with. They wanted to start somewhere, but they just didn't know how to. So why don't we do that today, right? This is a perfect example of awareness training. So let's look at some stories from the community and figure out what we can do to be more aware and more intentional, especially within this industry, right? And general tips like supporting burnout and meltdown. Now, in this industry, those are quite common. Like I mentioned, this is such a fast-paced and ever-evolving situation, right? But within the neurodiverse community, burnout and things like that often manifest in a specific way or different way. So let's talk about that and understand that at a fundamental level. How do we support the sensory needs of the community, right? Because neurodiversity describes a cognitive difference in which you see the world, of course, we feel things differently. And how does that affect your work? You know, how does that manifest, and what can we do to mitigate those issues? How do we reframe our thinking from the bottom up, right? When it comes to conversations, there may be misconstruements or, missed social cues, like I mentioned. And in an office environment, when you're engaging with clients, that can be a bit of a challenge, and there may be disagreements. How do we sort of have a more open mind fundamentally? And I think more relevantly and most relevantly is how does technology assist us in our effort for inclusivity, right? We are all people in the tech field that can easily download and make open source softwares, programs, like I've mentioned earlier, apps and things like that, that are mostly for free open source things that can immediately have an impact, whether it be small or large, in our effort for inclusivity and embracing the neurodiverse community within this industry, right? Does anyone have any questions so far? Well, we'll leave questions at the end, but I hope you guys are enjoying it so far. I do have a habit of talking fast, so let me know, right? So, yeah, the meme, that's very much me, having the best idea and then gone. How do we support burnout, right? I think a lot of our tech leads and just people in tech experience burnout quite quickly. But things like burnout manifest differently for those who are neurodiverse. There's a term that's quite popular within the community called executive dysfunction. This is when you reach a certain point of cognitive overload where tasks become unfinishable. You can't see the end goal, you're not motivated, but it can even be as extreme as outside the career. You may not even want to sort of take care of personal chores because you can't visualize the end goal. Things like that can be really detrimental to the productivity of, in this field, especially when things are so fast all the time. Autistic meltdown is another term. It usually takes place with children, but it can also manifest as an adult where it's a more emotional form of that, where you express a cognitive overload so bad that you express that through distress, overloaded distress, which can be quite hard to mitigate, right? My story is that I experienced, unfortunately, both, and it's quite a hard time to deal with, especially within a fast-paced and demanding industry. But going to a team lead as a junior has always been my go-to. I've had two very friendly team leads in my career, one who is neurodiverse friendly and understands the risks and sort of challenges with that. So we were able to devise a plan that, thanks to flexible working, I have the time to mitigate that meltdown and come back to it at a later stage, while the team effort is made to delegate the tasks in a sensitive way. Not saying, Cassandra's having a meltdown again, let's do the work, but saying, one of our coworkers needs assistance, right? Address the burnout head on. We're neither passive nor aggressive. Like I said, don't beat me down for doing something that is unfortunately something I can't control, but don't handle me with kitty gloves either. I am still an adult, and I need to know the consequences of something like this and have to know that there's still work to be done, There's still work to be done, and I still need to make that effort and use it as a learning opportunity. Like an example, time management. Using better time management was a tip that I learned from this experience. What can we do, though, to mitigate these things in the future and prevent them from happening, at least as not an intense sort of breakdown? Well, like I mentioned with executive dysfunction, the issue is visualization of your goals. So visualization of your goals, checklists, systems. Have notepads everywhere on your desk like I do if you must. Check everything off, get into a routine. Make planners, mind maps, check in with people, have like an interactive whiteboard or something, Trello board, Jira things that help you stay on track. And, physical things like notepads, like I said, make sure that you have a routine in place. Like I mentioned, team lead support is so vital. Team leads, think about effective planning strategies. Like I said, with delegating the work. Have it be a policy maybe when there's a code word, when a code word is said in your group chat, and immediately someone knows when to step in without questions, without asking, why is Cassandra doing this? Isn't it weird? Isn't it immature? No, sort of have it be like, we just know that we need to step in right now. Talk to your team, obviously. Find out the best way that you can handle these things. Like I said, can't paint everyone with the same brushstroke. How do we support the sensory needs of the community? Sensory needs refer to hypersensitivity or hyposensitivity to the senses, sound, sight, taste. My issues are with textures and lighting. Did you know that in America, at least, and most European countries, supermarkets have a sensory hour where they dim the lights. Instead of that bright white light, they dim them to a gold lighting like this. They shut down that annoying music that plays that no one really likes, but we have to deal with anyway. And for that hour, people can shop in peace. Not only do people with autism and ADHD benefit from this, but neurotypical people can agree that that's a really good idea, shopping in relative peace. So speaking of events like that in physical places, my story is, usually I like to rehearse for events. I sound like a madman when I say this, but I always rehearse. For this event, I downloaded menus, I downloaded parking things, I downloaded the layout of the room. I'm not gonna do anything weird, but I needed to know I needed to know where I could go if things were too loud. I needed to know where I could go if things were too bright. I needed to know if there was someone, like an officer or like a representative that I could go to and say, listen, things are too overwhelming here. This happened at a company event, one of my first company events. I deliberately planned that and researched that venue. I sat in the table that was furthest away from the light and furthest away from the noise, and in the corner, and I chose a very specific, I didn't choose the booth because booth, sticky seats, but preferably the wooden seat, So these are things that we have to think about. When I do get sensory overloaded though, breathing exercises, listing things around me in a sort of autistic manner. 5 senses, listing 5 things you can taste, 4 things you can touch. A routine like that calms me down, as well as stim toys. By stim toys, I mean things that, particularly within the autistic community, are toys that help us calm down. So things like squishy toys and even Rubik's Cubes, fidget spinners, are small things that mitigate a bigger meltdown. Having work from home and flexibility of office hours means I can control my environment at home when I have that need, and I know that working from home will be better for me that day. And I think we can all agree that noise-cancelling headphones are just God's given gift to us as an industry. But what do we do as management, right? Well, I had to now rehearse that whole event and practice what I was going to say, where I'm going to sit, so management can share some of that load, Choose specific venues that will not overstimulate or understimulate. Make sure that there may be a designated room or bathroom that is away from the bright area, the loud area, if you're going to a public space. Have there be transparency and someone that you can go to and escort to this place without shame or judgment, right? In your office space, do similar. Have a structured environment. Invest in soundproofing. Invest in to block out those unnecessary distractions. Invest in larger cubicles for those who have autism and Tourette's, who may exhibit motor tics and motor movements, so that they have more space to do that without hurting themselves or giving a karate chop to someone in the face, right? I've done that before, no judgment. Things like that. Invest, like I said, in the lighting. Warmer, more friendly lighting, less bright and hospital-like lighting. These things, like I said, can benefit those even who are not neurodivergent, but those with the neurodivergence in them will appreciate them so much. And it's little things like that, right? And what about the little things, right? How do we reframe our thinking from the bottom up? How do we do conflict resolution when neurotypical and neurodivergent sort of come across? My example here is something that happens to me all the time. I'm doing it, I'm quite happy right now, but usually I look like Patrick Bateman. I look like, and that's me on my wedding day if I ever got married. That would be me. Because part of my autism means I don't sort of emote well, and I'm not very good with eye contact. But when you're speaking to a client or something like that, they may see that as disrespect. These are things that you sort of have to iron out. Meet people halfway, have conversations like what we're doing right now. that example is like something like that happened to me where I didn't understand someone's sarcasm. It was really awkward because not only did now I think that the person, neurotypical person, was doing that on purpose just to mess with me and they were trying to make me dumb, but they might have thought that I was being dumb myself and not understanding their tone. But that's the wrong way to go about it. You shouldn't come into it thinking that the other person is automatically unaware, because right now we are getting more aware of it, and we know that tone and facial expressions now may be something that on the surface is disrespectful, but you should be more open-minded. Don't go into it like I did, where I thought that that person was trying to prank me or something. It's like, you use sarcasm just because you know I can't handle it, right? Be more open-minded. Meet people halfway. My story is, because of that, I need to educate people, and my mission is education, and to show that these things are happening, so that we can reframe our thinking and we are easily accessible to research and things like that. Research is so important. I've also disclosed my autism in my workplace, so people are more aware of it and they understand the sort of issues that I go through. But this is not always feasible. You have to understand the challenges of like older crowds, people in more remote areas, things like that. So research is so important. Obviously, a general tip: refrain from derogatory behavior. Don't be like Eric Cartman, like I mentioned. Don't use slurs. Don't rely on regressive stereotypes, but opt for authentic questions. In the future, instead of assuming that a neurotypical person is just using sarcasm to trick me or whatever, I should ask them instead, what do you mean by that? Like, not in an aggressive way, it's like, what do you mean by that? But like, I'd like to understand what tone you used. Sure, it may kill the joke, and I have a very bad habit of killing jokes, but you two become closer that way, right? And in the future that some things may need to be explained, things like that. And lastly, I think most relevantly, is how does technology help us in this effort? What tools can we use in our personal lives as well as in our companies, in our institutions, that are so easy to implement, right? And easy for us to understand as a tech industry? Well, my story is I like routines and things like that I've mentioned. So scheduling meetings, all of them are scheduled. There's no such thing as ad hoc for me. I know it annoys people because like, Cass, can I have a chat? Put it in my calendar. This just helps me so that I can mask, right? Masking is a term by the neurodivergent community where we basically live action role play being typical, So we make more effort in toning down or stemming behaviors. We make eye contact even if it distresses us. We have to integrate ourselves into life somehow, right? So that is masking. So scheduling meetings helps me prepare for that and prepare for that emotional, load that it is on me. Tools that are on Windows, at least, I don't use Mac, but there's a tool such as Microsoft Focus Periods. Those block out unnecessary notifications and uses the Pomodoro timing technique, which is like 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off, which is a good routine then to get to for those who have routine as one of their neurodiverse traits. Music playlists. Music playlists like White Noise, 10 Hours. That's my favorite song right now, guys. This isn't really catchy. White Noise, 10 Hours. That's my favorite song. I love it on the radio. It's got such a good beat on it. But things like that scratch the neurodivergent itch for that, sort of repetitive sound or something like that. So these are available on Spotify and YouTube for free. And those who have issues, like I have issues with getting distracted so easily, so my phone is like, something like that. So it's anti-fubbing. That action of just going like this is called fubbing. So having an app like, there's one called Forest, which prevents you and discourages you from looking at your phone all the time. This can be used for everyone, of course. I think in our day and age with the phone addiction, that is really useful. But what do we do as an institution, as a software company, things that can make things more accessible to people, as well as, do team building and learning about each other through the use of apps? Well, like I said, intelligent meeting features. There's things like scheduling meetings, but also transcribing meetings, recording meetings. Those are general accessibility tips that I can provide. There are HR solutions. The one that we currently use is called Bamboo HR, and that has an option where you can track down your goals at like a, sort of structured level, and it will send you reminders, which is really good for those who have, like I said, issues with visualizing your goals and needing reminders, stuff like that. HR solutions in general, like I mentioned, people have issues getting hired. Why are the issues? Well, one of the issues is, if for those who apply for jobs as women tend to want to meet all the requirements before hiring, whereas men tend to, okay, some of the requirements I'll apply anyway. It's not sexism, by the way. It's on a lot of job applications. The same as for neurodivergent people. We want to meet 10 out of the 10 requirements. So have that disclaimer on your company website, include neurodivergent people. Have that thing saying, we encourage you to apply regardless of your gender or neurodiverse status, disability status, in general, inclusivity tips. Opt for the option of video interviews for those who have sensory issues like in an office environment. Open Dyslexic is a font designed by the dyslexic community for the dyslexic community. This whole presentation has been written in it. It is a font that is used to maximize legibility. So consider downloading this font and using it as an option in your software product that you sell or internal product. And Emergency Chat is an app that you could use as a policy as well for those neurodiverse people who become nonverbal. When you get such a cognitive load that you can no longer express that verbally. So that app can be shown and a policy can be made so that when someone does show that, you know what to do then. That person may be out of action. A few slides back, I showed a meme of a communication bracelet, which also could signify cognitive load. So consider setting that as your Slack status or Skype status. Do not disturb versus online, something similar to that, but have it be transparent so that people who are overloaded at that point can also do that. And there are two apps here that you can maybe use as team building exercises. Habitica gamifies task completion, which thereby motivates you and also visualizes. So consider that having be a team building activity. Headspace is a guided meditation app that also neurodiverse people and neurotypical people use to sort of soothe themselves after sensory overload. So that can be like a weekly thing, a weekly therapy session or something like that. We have something similar in my company, right? But now I've just thrown a lot of things at you, right? And don't worry, there's more resources at the end that you can scan. You can scan and the QR code and find all these resources for yourself. But at the end of the day, what if you feel like you can't do any of these practical things, right? You don't know what sensory overload is. You don't know what a communication bracelet is. You don't know where to start, right? So these are two quotes that the word that came to mind was harvested. That is not how I refer to interviewing people. That's not how you should use that. Collected, gathered. I don't know. I feel like I'm being a freaking caveman here. Oh, Hunter gathered some quotes. I collected them from surveying. That's also a bad word. Interviewing. You see, I'm not good with this. Interviewing in a normal fashion two of my also fellow neurodiverse colleagues at my workplace. And I've highlighted these keywords because that's the be-all and end-all of what I want to show you guys today. Of course, with all this information I've thrown at you, don't forget to close all the tabs in your head from what I've thrown at you, but just keep one open, understanding. The first colleague says, if it's ever feel like it's hard to understand us, remember that we are just one person that you have to try and understand, and that we have to try and understand everyone. So it's true that the neurodiverse community, this world is not built with that in mind as a minority group in general. We do a lot of effort to integrate ourselves into society so that we can lead fulfilling jobs, to get into the tech career, to find love, to find relationships, whereas those things are normally have those challenges for us, like the cognitive challenges, what I've just gone through. But we do that anyway, even though it might cause us distress, because we want to be integrated into society. We want to be in this career, we want to contribute, right? And the effort that we put in is rewarded with that satisfaction. So why not consider doing that effort yourself as well? You will also get benefit from that. I've gone in the beginning to show there are numbers to back up the benefit from an institutional level, but on a personal level. Making an effort to understand your neurodivergent colleague, whether it be just on a casual, friendly basis and not judging them for certain things that they may have been judged for before. It builds a stronger friendship, builds a stronger coworker, just a human connection and a safe area that that person can be around with. And in return, you get a loyal coworker, a loyal employee, someone who will then understand that they can then go the extra mile for you and reward you in that sense. The second quote is, better understanding amongst your colleagues and peers will do much more than being treated differently. At the end of the day, it may not be about the STEM toys or planning out sort of special events or treating us in a different way and like skirting around us, things like that. At the end of the day, key understanding and just being treated like an individual instead of like the media and stereotypes have sort of put upon us, pop culture and regressive stereotypes. Understanding that we are also just fellow professionals and people who want to get far in life, and just having an open-minded conversation with us and respecting us, respectful and authenticity, does much more than being treated differently and doing these practical things. Again, communication is so important in terms of this. Like I mentioned, it's hard to paint everyone with the same stroke. But understanding, keyword understanding, is already half the battle won, and that you can already see a difference. You will see the benefit, not only for yourself, but for your institution, for your company, for yourself. And that is why it's so important to consider embracing the neurodiverse community within your life. If you need more information, which will be at a QR code at the end, no worries, there are local and international resources that I recommend. The Resources for Employers Master List has a huge list of what you can look at any level, whether you be a manager, junior, middle level. It gives interviews with people as well as documentation, things like that. Read up about it. Like I said, everything will be at the end. But it's so important that research can be done as well. Because like I said, that need for awareness training, that's 78%, let's get that down then. Let's be inclusive and intentional about it by accessing technology and the internet that has opened the borders of information to easily and much easily, embrace the community. Just an aside, if you want to find out what neurological capability that makes you special and makes you, this is not a diagnosis tool, this is just in general, whether you be an analytical thinker or someone who is good at routine, these are things that are either neurotypical or neurodivergent. But what skills can you bring to tech that are in your neurological capability? You can scan this and stand a chance to win a 2,000 Red Takeover voucher courtesy of my company, Solid iTech. But yeah, of course, we're not diagnosing you with anything. We are seeing what part of your brain contributes to the industry, whether you be, like I say, an analyst, creative, right brain thinking, things like that. And that's pretty much it. Don't forget your mask before you leave, and the other one where you pretend to like humans, and you pretend to like small talk and eye contact. Don't forget that mask either. Feel free to rate me, but you can rate anyone at any time. I think those QR codes will be all over. And like I said, the resources are the bottom QR code. That's the whole resources that I mentioned earlier, and you can peruse that at your discretion. Now, we have some time if anyone has any questions. Yes, you, with the glasses.
As someone who is neurotypical, what can I do on a day-to-day basis to start creating a safe and inclusive environment?
A safe and inclusive environment on a day-to-day basis? Well, I assume you're in the tech industry, you're working with computers. One of the things, like I mentioned, is scheduling meetings. That's already something very easy so that people are prepared for that, masking like that. That's something that can be done on a day-to-day basis in your... Oh, I think I just switched it off accidentally. That's fun. I think they'll sort it out for me. I've just... buttons. My tendency is to click, 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 because I like that, and then I realize I probably shouldn't do that. Things like scheduling meetings. Things like I mentioned with the communication bracelet. If someone is wearing something like that at your workplace, be more open-minded about that and sort of respect that maybe if they do need to, get away for a while. I'm not exactly sure of the place you work, but there are sort of key tips like that. At the end of the day, also just respectful, authentic questions as well. But like more practical tips would be like the scheduling meetings, recording them perhaps as well, having, how do I say, like minutes of meetings, things like that also helps us in a summarized form, maybe even in a visual form as well. Things like that. Hope that helps. You can definitely ask me anytime. I'll think of some things that are more general use. Hi, blue shirt.
First of all, thanks very much. That was very enlightening, and thanks for stepping out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
So my question is actually quite similar. I have ADHD, which I kind of consider like neurodiversity light. I mean, it's an easy one to deal with, and and I talk about it easily.
Yeah.
But I realize some other neurodiverse people prefer not to talk about their angst,
Yeah. Disclosing.
challenges, and so on. And so you may find yourself in a professional environment, like you have a direct report
Yes.
or just a junior on your team,
Yes.
whom you consider might have some form of neurodiversity. Is there a safe way to broach the topic? If
Do you mean?
you disclose this, to ask them, like, I mean, you're not going to ask them, are you autistic?
Yeah.
How do you ask this person, what do you need from me? What
Yeah.
is the best you can do?
I think you don't necessarily have to address the person directly, but you can install policies, like I mentioned, that are general for everyone to use. Like I mentioned with the policy of, when there is a meltdown, maybe send a specific emoji in your group, and then whoever sent that, you can maybe ask what is going on. They don't necessarily need to disclose, but they will appreciate having that option to display when they are having cognitive overload, something like that. Policies like the emergency chat policy, policies like open dyslexic font policy. Those are things that subtly show that you are aware for those that may possibly be in your organization or institution, but you're not calling anyone out, obviously, and making them feel like they have to now disclose themselves or like. Obviously, it's good to have that relationship because I have a relationship like that with my current team where we're both neurodiverse. But it can be difficult to now broach that question. But start by fostering a culture where that person will feel more comfortable to make that conversation themselves, to be the one to bring it to you. Because I think that's a more sensitive way of dealing with it. Have it be a safe environment where they know that they can then do this without being judged for it. Yeah. Does that help? Okay, perfect. Yeah. Oh, touch my mic. Any other questions? You can always ask me as well afterwards. Hi.
I've worked in different tech teams, and in those tech teams, different types of neuro
Yeah, the spectrum.
and diverse. And often it's conflict. Tech teams for some reason are so much more conflict, like more like
Conflict-oriented, easier to agitate. I think we're just so tense all the time.
so I'd love some tips. Obviously, kind of having recorded meetings and those things are helpful to try and separate people. At the end of the day, people need to be with each other.
Yeah. In like an office environment, obviously. Like, there is good from working from home, but like I mentioned, we do still want to integrate ourselves into, spaces in life and things that we do. So what happens when there is like an office altercation, right? Or like people don't understand each other in real life? Is that your question? Basically, like when there are disagreements in real life that, like nuance and tone and things like that at the water cooler, not understanding social cues. It's good to have an HR department. It's good to have an HR department. And it's also good to... I guess general conflict resolution tips would be applicable in that scenario, but you also don't want it to delve into like, slurs against each other, because there are slurs when it comes to the neurodivergent community. So there should be policies in place, obviously, with any conflict resolution, but like, I'm thinking now how, I'm wondering the best way, and also I'm on a timer, so let me think. Things like conflicts, when it comes to like in real life, they're bound to happen, obviously. And when it comes to neurotypical, neurodivergent, when it's social conversations, they're more likely. So what can be done is, like I said, having HR, maybe having someone on the floor that will notice this, having like someone who is maybe like a HR junior or something aware of that, as well as... I'll have to think about that because I work from home, so I don't really see these things. But I think just general HR presence is needed, because then there's policies, then there's things that like legislation, and then works with that if there is sort of tension, and then it delves into being like a us versus them, typical versus divergent thing, because then that sort of leads into, okay, dicey things. I'll think about it, but yeah, does that answer your question for now? Okay, but yeah, I'll think about it and let you know. I have 23 seconds. Does anyone have a quick question for me? Or just want to say how cool I am? Thank you. Yeah, I don't have much time for a question left, but you can ask me afterwards. Hello. Thank you. Thank you so much. Oh, if you want to do that, I'll flip through these. Do you everyone want to scan this thing quickly? It's also, I'm going to give you business cards. I've got business cards so that you can scan that. All done. Thank you so much for attending my talk. I hope you learned something. And I'm going to be walking around everywhere today. Teddy sweatshirt, obviously, and then you can just ask me anything about what you learned today. And of course, I'll give him the business card that has this QR code on it. Thank you so much, guys. Enjoy the rest of your day. I hope you learned something.